Reading with your kids.
Hola, niho, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni miliwanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We're so delighted and so very honored and thrilled that you are joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show in the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. Our guest today is known as the Happy Home Mastermind. Her name is Megan Barella. Before we invite Megan into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by the books by Lauren Kirsten. Are you looking for books about courage, strength, friendship, foster care, and dragons? Who doesn't love dragons? Well, look no further. Lauren Kirsten is the author of Rosie the Dragon and Charlie, a fantastic series that we've celebrated here on the podcast. And she's also the author of Home for a While, which was nominated for the South Carolina Book Award. If you want to laugh, cry, learn how to swim, learn some great bedtime tips, and find social emotional strategies, you definitely want to check out laurenkirsten.net. Lauren's books blend her Jersey Girl humor with her psychotherapist heart. Join us right now from the wonderful state of Oregon. Our guest today, she is the Happy Home Mastermind. I can't wait for you to meet Megan Barella. Hey, Megan, how are you?
Hello, Dad. It's so wonderful to be here today.
I'm really excited. The Happy Home Mastermind. How did you get that title, winning a battle royal of some sort?
Well, I always jokingly say that my son whispered in my ear that if you want to help children, help their parents. And as he said, you teach parenting because you need it. So I feel like we all strive for a happy home. And then it's working with the reality of the stressors of parenting today. So that's the backstory of the happy home.
You know, it's really, really interesting. I was sharing with Megan some of my experiences as a educational magician and traveling around the country, and it was always my hope, if I was talking to kids about reading, about making healthy choices, about helping to build a bully-free culture and an accepting culture within their school, I knew that my message had to, in order for it to stick, it had to get to the parents. And for 30 years, I wasn't able to, I was able to get to the kids and they were able to hear me. But even though I would give schools information that they could share with parents, I know that it wasn't getting to the parents. So I know that the message wasn't as effective as I wanted it to be. And that's one of the reasons I love having this podcast, because I get to speak directly to the parents and hopefully they can share my fun and enthusiasm with their kids, and they can be the star of the show instead of me traveling around the country doing it. It sounds like that's something that your son helped you realize real early.
Definitely, definitely. And part of that was really my parenting journey is sharing my love of reading and books that I inherited from my mom and grandma. You know, I was thinking about today and I was laughing because, I have my entire collection of childhood books. And that wasn't my mom. That was me saving it. I remember bringing it, storing it and bringing it to different places I moved. I have my entire collection of books. My books were really some of my greatest friends as a child. And to see that in my son, to just love reading. And people will comment, wow, Phoenix, that's my son, he just loves to read. And that really is part of our family value and culture. And I also recognize that parents are juggling a lot today. So I hope to share some easy ways to bring reading alive for your family.
That is wonderful. I know, and I remember fondly, my first book that I owned. It was a book called Mr. Bear Went to Boston. And it was the first book that somebody gave to me. And it was came from my godfather, but I have a feeling his wife was the one who bought the book, because she bought all those educational toys. And I love the book. And it was really neat because it was about this bear came down from Maine and was visiting all the places in Boston. And I was going to visit with my family on the weekends. And it was cool. I don't have the book. Yeah, but that was almost 100 years ago. I know it's available on Amazon, but it costs like $1,000, something ridiculous. And the memories are just as good, and they don't cost me any money. That's so neat that you have your collection of books.
Yeah, and I'm thinking maybe I should price check them on eBay or Amazon.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Right now, you can just photocopy them and you can have them. It's so cool. And the other thing, there were a lot of books that I remember from my youth that we brought into our home for our kids. And again, another book that was based in Boston was Make Way for Ducklings. And again, it was like, yeah, I walked where the ducklings were going. And so, isn't it funny how these memories are just branded into our brains, all of our brains?
Right. And the power of books to really bring us to a different place. We were talking a little bit before we started about where I grew up in upstate New York, which is a pretty small place. And people didn't tend to move around that much. The beautiful thing about books is that it can bring us to anywhere that we want to go. And also, it's just such a fabulous way to connect with our kids, which, yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about that connection a little bit more. It's a deep connection, but you're like the expert. So I've been talking about connection for so long, but it's just me. I'm a simple guy, kind of clown, magician guy. You have the expertise. Help us understand what that connection is really like.
Well, and we all have expertise that they weave together. So it's great to be here today to share a little bit on my perspective of connection. So connection, what's some of the missing piece in thinking about connecting with our kids is that connection is a basic human need. And we're just starting to recognize that. Food, water, shelter, connection, connecting with our kids. No child, we can't put a child out in the woods and have them survive in isolation unless they're raised by wolves, right? That connection piece is wired into our DNA. And children are born very experience dependent, where, 90% of brain development happens in those first 5 years of life through relationships with our caregivers, parents, and teachers. And really, our children were growing their brains through the connected relationship and quality time with us. So when we start to think of, meeting, especially during the last couple of years in the pandemic, there's so many basic needs to meet, and that connection needs are just important as feeding our kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. How are some of the best ways to make those connections?
I love reading. And why I love reading is because it's easy. Parents are very taxed right now. And sometimes the idea of going into our children's world of play and following their lead in play, which is one of the best ways to connect with our kids, it's not physically or emotionally possible for parents all the time with everything that parents are juggling. Books are such an easy way to connect. You can find a cozy spot. You don't have to think up the storyline. You don't have to guide the activity. The book is guiding the connection. You can also have positive physical contact. You can sit next to your kids on the couch. It can be cozy. You can have little treats. You can have a blanket. You can create this little reading nook or world. And if you find that I don't even have the energy to read the book right now because I like to honor the real life stressors that parents are facing right now, then you can have your kids walk you through the pictures, or, for our early literacy kids, preschool and toddlers, have them, create the story for you, have your older kids read to you. So I love reading for connection because it really takes a lot of the pressure off parents. It's an easy way to connect.
I love that idea. I remember when my kids were young, and you just reminded me, we had a special way that we snuggled. My daughter was always on my left. My son was always on my right. If they mixed it up, they would correct. And it wasn't like, no, that's my spot. It's like, oh, no. And it was one of the few, things in life, that they were able to figure out without freaking out on each other. It was like, no, that's my, oh yeah, okay. And get right back there and, and then into the story. And I love that you talk about, one, recognizing the parents are overwhelmed and that they are exhausted. And, we talk about, there's some parents that are working 3 jobs, to put food on the table. And others are working 3 jobs because they think, college is $70,000 a year right now. My kid's 5. What's it going to be like when they're 18? It's going to be $250,000 a year. I need to work this time to get all this money. So letting parents know that there are ways to just take a simple picture walk, go through or take out the photo album and just have them go through and tell me, what was this? What was it? When did we take this? What were you thinking when you were a baby and we took this picture of you?
I love that. So it's looking at reading beyond books and into that dialogue and entering that world of the imagination with our children. It's so fun to think about. I also love the idea. I talk about a lot with parents of this idea of parallel play, which we often think of as like 2 kids playing next to each other. And I help parents set up opportunities to do kind of parallel play with your child, in that you're reading your book or magazine and then your child is next to you. I know now that my son is 13, we try and have like some regular like reading times. We've also gone through the same series. He usually flies through it faster than me, but that's also been fun, like reading as connection, really thinking about that throughout our kids' development. I was also, just a couple other practical things. I was working with a family that really prioritized reading to the point where it was a to-do list item and the child was really resisting and they were having power struggles. And we really want to infuse our children with our joy and love of reading without the pressure. So what I recommended they do is, and you want to modify this for what you're up for, but just take a bunch of books, have them on the floor. And it's not a regimented reading time. It's just like almost having overflowing access to books and letting the child, they don't have to read the whole book. They can flip through some pages. They can go through the other one and letting it be really fluid. Another fun idea that can be also cool for holidays or even like a birthday week. This family went to the library. I love this. And they wrapped up like a week of books. And every morning the child unwrapped a different library book. It's like, I love that. You're getting the element of surprise and gift giving without it having to cost a cent.
That is genius.
I know.
It's like Christmas every morning. Yeah. That's such a super idea. And I love how you reminded it. We talk a lot here on the podcast about reading with your kids. It doesn't stop when your kid becomes an independent reader. That is the time to really kind of dive into it, continue to read aloud with them, continue to co-read as you were talking about, read the same books, talk about it over dinner on the way to soccer or ballet or school, whatever. And even with your older kids, we've had some wonderful authors of books that aren't written for kids that would be wonderful experiences for teens and families to co-read or to read together.
Awesome. I will have to go back and check that out. I know my son's preference now is more the parallel reading and he's doing his own reading, but the last read aloud we did was probably when he was 9, and we read Harry Potter books 1 to 4 out loud. And I'll tell you, that first chapter of Harry Potter, I think it's like 50 pages. And I thought, oh my goodness, how am I going to do this? And then we flew. I think we read book 1 in like a week, you know? So when you can get like swept up into the adventure, and as adults, we read for escapism. Like, let's honor that. Which brings me to another, you know, where I am now in my reading journey is I realize, coming from an English and a literature background, that I used to really value fine literature, and I don't anymore. I value ease of literature, and I'm okay with that. I read young adults. I read more romantic comedies than I ever thought I would. And it's been so refreshing. I'm kind of jokingly saying to friends, it's like Netflix and a book. You know, we've kind of go into that entertainment, into shows, and it's been really just honestly empowering to bring it back with getting off our screens and being like, no, I want my entertainment to come with books, from books, and it's okay if it's not high quality literature.
Well, you mentioned Netflix, something that, you know, some of us have gotten to the end of Netflix during the pandemic, and hard to believe, but seems it is true. There have been moments I felt I've gotten to the end of it. But how do we as parents encourage our kids to continue to read when they have these really shiny, flashy, loud, noisy, screeny kind of things? They have video games that are screaming for their attention. They have social media that has artificial intelligence that is way smarter than we are, that is programmed just to keep our kids' attention glued to their screens. How can we compete against that?
You know, I was just looking down as you were talking, because being in education, you know, I've been a little like on the media literacy and a little anti-media for kids since the 90s, which is kind of funny because I look at it now, it's like, what was wrong with media in the 90s? I'll take that any day. I mean, the research is clear. The screens are designed to create lifelong consumers and addicts, and where it goes on all sorts of negative roads that we don't want our children to go on. Now, it's important that our children learn how to navigate their relationship with screens. They're not going anywhere. And I empower adults and parents to take the lead for really their children's brain health. That's why I tell my son all the time with this, like, my job is to keep your brain safe. That is my number one job. And screens are really jeopardizing that safety for our young people. So I empower parents, especially when we get our little ones. It's been so different in the pandemic, where we're really looking at quality of programming for screens over quantity. That's what like Common Sense Media recommends. But really, now that we're kind of coming out, hopefully on the other side of the pandemic, this is a time to rein it in a little bit. And if you're listening and you have a 3-year-old, or you have a 5, you have a 7, you have a 9-year-old, this is your time. Because once the kids hit 12, things really change in their media life. And it's so much of what it means to be a teenager today that we're helping our kids navigate a different type of media savviness. The best thing that we can do for our kids is just look at the balance, because a lot of us have been using screens as babysitters during the pandemic. Just look at that balance, because the more kids are on screens, the less they're going to love being engaged with real life. And so a great thing to look at is, I don't know how you feel about audiobooks, but I direct parents have had great success. Yep. Going from screen time to audiobook time. You know, you can get, there's apps from your library. You can get them out from your library. Sparkle Stories. There's so many, there's kids podcasts. So that's been a really gentle way for parents to kind of decrease from those screens, because the research is clear that the dopamine, the addictive quality of screens for our children are just, they can be really detrimental in excess. And it's going to cause a host of behavioral challenges when the screen times flip to the other side into that imbalance, when it really becomes a stress on our children's brains.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I spent the afternoon with my incredible niece, and we had such a wonderful time. She's 18, getting ready to graduate college, getting ready to graduate high school, go to college, and she was talking to me, telling me that I need to get on TikTok. You need to get on TikTok to promote your podcast, and this is how you do it. And she's showing me, and she was recognizing, TikTok, it's like it fills the screen. It makes your clock go away, so you don't even know how long you're on it. It's like they do that intentionally. So she's understanding the psychology of the app, that the app kind of takes away your awareness. And she goes, but I have an alarm on my phone. So I'm only staying on my phone on the apps a certain amount of time. And I'm really proud of her because she's starting, and I think it's something that we can all do with our kids. It's help them become media literate now even more than in the 90s. Kids need to know what's going on. They need to understand that every bit of media that they are consuming was created intentionally by someone, and that someone created that to get our kids to do something. It might be to buy something, to think a certain way, to behave a certain way, or to become consumers and to become glued to the screen. So it's, what you and I were both worried about in the 90s is even more important today.
Yeah, I do want to say yes to all that, and you would be really great on TikTok. You know what? It's so funny. I think about getting on TikTok. I have the app I have an account, and I got on, and I felt so anxious because it's just video after video. And the content, I wouldn't say that I'd never been on before. I wouldn't say that the content was inappropriate, but I would say it was borderline and not something I want our kids to be seeing. Mm-hmm. I felt so anxious, and I thought, you know what? TikTok for my business is going to have to wait a while. But I saw where kids are more anxious today. They can't, that delayed gratification, that entertain me, that addictive. It's like we're changing children's brains to be on demand. It's like, ugh. So kudos to your niece.
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that has helped with my niece and it helped with my kids is to have real conversation with them about the reality of themselves, about their brain development. When I was talking to my kids about drugs and alcohol, I wasn't talking about the evils of drugs and alcohol, number one. I was talking to them about how their brain was developing and how everything that they were consuming, and at first it was, food and whatever they put into their body, was going to affect their brain either in a positive way or a negative way. And I think that that's something that I think most kids, if we sit down and respect them and talk to them in a respectful way and say, look, dude, it's not about banning something. It's not about keeping you from something that you love. It's about, like you said before, protecting your brain. Your brain is developing. It's not there yet, and so we need to make sure that it grows in the way that's going to make you happiest. It's going to help you live the life that you want to live.
So true, Jen, and really having those conversations, because on the flip side, screens can be a tool of manipulation and kind of control that we fall into as parents. And so just kind of honoring that tendency and really letting it be a dialogue and a conversation with our kids. A couple things to look at, like if you're wanting to reevaluate your screen time, is how do your children get off screens? That's really important, because if they get off and there's a power struggle or an emotional breakdown, that means that either they're consuming content that's too fast and too stressful for their brain, or they've just been on too long. So everything's workable from that place. Now, the other thing to look at is, are they only, I call Minecraft for, I would say, the under age 9. If all they're talking about is that video game, then it's consuming their imagination. And those are just a couple things to neutrally and with compassion look at for our kids. Those are great, a great barometer. If our kids can get how they get off the screens, and then what else they're talking about, because ultimately we want our children to live freedom, real lives. We want them to have we want them to be satisfied with real life. We want them to love real life, and books can connect us with that. And also going back to the positive relationship and the connection is a basic human need. Screens are not giving our kids that real life connection. And it's scary to think about raising a generation of kids who aren't wired for positive relationship. That's putting us really in a very stressful space as a species, since connection is a basic human need. So moderation, though, is usually the middle road, right?
Right. Yeah. And it's easy for us, to sit down and say, Johnny, I'm sorry, you can't do peanut butter. You're allergic. And again, it's kind of like the way we view mental health. It's like when we can see it, when we can touch it, okay, we know how to deal with it. The way, the effect that screens are having on our kids, we can't really see it, right? If we look close enough, we can see behaviors and, just kind of fascinations or the words not coming into my feeble brain here. But, we can, if we look close enough, we can see how it is affecting our kids. And I think it's important for us all to sit down and really, really focus in and see what's going on with our kids and their screens.
Yeah, definitely agree. And, this is a great place, again, as we're coming out of the pandemic, hopefully, to really reevaluate. My son and I actually just had this conversation because I'm always asking his friends, like, how do you do screens? Because I like to kind of source his peer group, and then we're picking and choosing. And we just had a conversation today about reevaluating something. And, with screens at this point, I do not go and make harsh, very quick decisions. We have a conversation. And we make plans and then we tweak the plans. Mm-hmm. And that's what we do for everything, including screens. So we want the discussion to be collaborative with our kids. And then also just recognizing that, gosh, it can be hard to say less screens, more reading. Boredom's going to lead to imagination. It can be hard to make that leap. And that's why it is really important to not do it in haste, to not do it in a reactive way, to know that it is about having a plan and communicating collaboratively with your children, because kids get it. Sadly, we have had kids in our peer group where they are really screen addicted. And, my son's been able to see that. And it's sad. It's worrisome. He sees that firsthand. So,
yeah. So I think what you've been saying is parenting has to be done intentionally.
Yes, and collaboratively with our kids, really trusting our kids.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not like tennis. You don't have to sit there just batting the balls as they're coming, reacting. It's like let's make a plan and let's do this the right way.
That's right. And that analogy of the tennis balls coming at us, that's kind of how pandemic parenting has been. And that's what I've been helping parents get back to, that place of intentionality and really creating the visions that we want for our homes and lives, while also honoring the real life challenges and stressors everyone's working with today.
Yeah. Well, I think we could chat for hours, but I know that you have a busy, busy life being the Happy Home Mastermind. Where can people go to find out more about what you do?
Yes, they can visit meganbarella.com and my website. And in the social media land, Parenting for the Next Generation is my Facebook group. Really nice community there and very compassionate, non-judgmental support. And I also offer a complimentary 5-day masterclass training called the Happy Home Week. We just wrapped up, and the next one will be in April, and that's hosted in that Facebook group.
Awesome, neat. I love giving our listeners opportunities to try stuff out for free.
Yes, me too. I love free, and I'm a bargain shopper at heart.
There you go.
That has been so great. Thank you for the work that you do. It's been so amazing to be your guest today.
Well, thank you so much. We've had a great time speaking with the Happy Home Mastermind, Megan Barella. Megan, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Jed. Take good care, and take good care, everyone. Be well, be good to yourself.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Leticia Ordaz. Leticia is returning to the show to celebrate the Carousel King and the space mission. It is a fantastic interview. You do not want to miss it. We want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, we want to start by thanking our guests, the Happy Home Mastermind, Megan Barella. Please be sure to check out her website. Also want to thank our sponsor, The Books by Lauren Kirsten. Check out Rosie, the Dragon, and Charlie, and also Home for a While. Want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Skylar Strauss, Frank Guerrillos. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.